Hey, freedom seekers. Welcome to English Story School. Part 1. The Choice No One Understood. Have you ever heard of someone who refused to walk out of prison when the gates were wide open? Sound insane, right? Freedom was just a step away, yet he chose to stay behind the bars. Why? Because sometimes the strongest cages are not made of iron, but of purpose. It all began with a man named Ethan Cole, a name forgotten by the world, yet whispered through the walls of a cold, gray prison. A man with eyes that didn't match the despair around him. While others looked defeated, his gaze carried fire, a strange, calm flame that refused to die. Ethan had been locked away for 12 long years for a crime he didn't commit. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. But Ethan never argued, never defended himself. He simply accepted his fate, almost as if he wanted to be there. Inside those concrete walls, where time crawled and dreams decayed, Ethan did something extraordinary. He started changing people. The thieves, the killers, the lost souls, all began to listen to him, not because he preached, but because he understood. His words carried something powerful. You don't find freedom by walking out, he once said. You find it by freeing what's broken inside. The guards began noticing. The fight stopped. The darkness dimmed. And in the middle of that hell, a strange kind of light began to grow. Then one day it happened. The governor's order came. Ethan was granted pardon, a free man at last. The gate opened, and everyone cheered. But Ethan just stood there, calm, silent, motionless. The warden looked at him, puzzled. "Ethan, it's over. You're free. Go home." Ethan smiled faintly and said the words that would echo through time. "My home is in here." Until they all remember theirs. No one could believe it. Who in their right mind would refuse freedom after 12 years behind bars? But Ethan wasn't chasing his own freedom anymore. He was fighting for theirs. As the days passed, prisoners started whispering stories about how Ethan helped a killer forgive himself, how he taught an addict to paint again, how he made a man who had lost everything believe in tomorrow. He was no longer a prisoner. He had become a mission. They said his cell felt different. It wasn't a place of punishment anymore. It was a place of awakening. And every man who walked out of that cell walked out changed. Someone once asked him, "Ethan, aren't you tired of saving others while you're out here?" He smiled again, his voice calm and strong. "You call it rotting. I call it rebirth. Even in chains, a purpose can make you more free than those who walk the streets without one." That was Ethan's truth, and the beginning of the legend that no one saw coming. Part 2. The Mission Behind the Bars. They called him the Saint of Stonewall Prison, a name that echoed through metal corridors and sleepless nights. Ethan Cole, the man who could have walked free, but chose to stay. But what no one knew was that behind those calm eyes, he carried a secret that could shake the system itself. Ethan's days began before dawn. While others cursed the morning siren, he knelt on the cold concrete floor, whispering words of peace to a place that had never known silence. His cellmates thought he was praying, but he wasn't. He was planning. Every breath, every word, every gesture, part of a mission far greater than anyone imagined. His plan wasn't about escape. It was about transformation. He believed that even the darkest hearts could reignite, that the prison wasn't a place of end. It was a place of rebirth. One night, as thunder rolled outside, a new prisoner arrived, a young man named Rico Hale, covered in tattoos, anger glowing in his eyes. Rico was trouble from the moment he walked in. Violent, reckless, untamed. But Ethan saw something else. He saw himself, the man he once was before the world broke him. That night, Rico attacked a guard, and chaos exploded across the block. Alarms blared. Men screamed. Guards charged in with batons. But in the middle of that madness, Ethan stepped forward, calm, fearless. He grabbed Rico's arm, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "If you keep fighting the world, you'll never win. But if you start fighting your darkness, you already have." Rico froze. For a moment, time stopped. Everyone watched, even the guards. And from that moment, something in Rico began to change. He started sitting by Ethan's side during the morning silence. He listened. He learned. Days turned into weeks, and soon Ethan had gathered a group, not of followers, but of believers. Men who wanted to change, men who wanted to be free inside. They called themselves the Reclaimed. Ethan began teaching them in whispers after lights out. Not lessons of law, but of life. Freedom, he said, isn't about the gate opening. It's about the chains you decide to break when no one's watching. He taught them forgiveness, self-control, courage, and compassion, things the world had taken from them long ago. But not everyone liked the light Ethan was spreading. Some of the old guards didn't believe in redemption. Some inmates felt threatened. And somewhere beyond those walls, someone powerful didn't want Ethan's mission to succeed. Because a free mind, even behind bars, is the most dangerous kind of power. Rumors spread. Whispers turned to warnings. Ethan's name appeared in reports. His teachings marked as disruptive influence. But Ethan didn't stop. He looked at his men, broken, scarred, but awake, and said, "If truth is dangerous, then let's be dangerous together." The Reclaimed began to change the prison from within. They stopped fights, helped others read, fixed things, built hope. The same walls that once heard screams now echoed with laughter and learning. For the first time in decades, Stonewall Prison felt alive. But the brighter the light shone, the deeper the shadows became. The moment you start changing lives, the world starts testing yours. And Ethan was about to face a test that would define everything. His mission, his courage, his faith. Because one night, something or someone would try to silence the Reclaimed forever. Part 3. The storm that tested the mission. The night was silent, too silent for a place like Stonewall Prison. Even the air felt strange, heavy, charged with something dark. Ethan could feel it, that strange stillness before chaos. The kind of silence that screams before the storm hits. He opened his eyes in the dark, his instincts sharper than ever. From the corridor outside, he heard faint whispers, hurried footsteps, then the unmistakable sound of a key turning where no key should turn. A moment later, fire erupted. Not real flames, but the fire of hatred, jealousy, and fear. Cells burst open, chaos spread like poison. The Reclaimed, Ethan's brothers of light, were under attack. The old gang leaders, the ones who'd lost control because of Ethan's influence, had decided to take back their rule with blood. Ethan rushed toward the noise. He saw Rico, the young man he'd saved, locked in a fight, blood dripping down his face, eyes wild with fear. Ethan didn't hesitate. He jumped in, his voice cutting through the madness like thunder. Enough. This is not who we are anymore. But hatred doesn't listen. A shiv flashed in the dark. Ethan shoved Rico aside, and a blade buried deep into his side. He stumbled, gasping, eyes wide yet calm. Rico caught him before he fell, screaming his name. Ethan! No, no, no. But Ethan just smiled weakly, his voice steady even as blood soaked his shirt. Don't cry for me, Rico. Cry for the man you'll never become if you stop believing now. The guards stormed in. Sirens screamed. Lights exploded across the yard. The chaos froze in the blinding glare. Men dropped their weapons, stunned by what they'd done. The man who'd brought them peace was bleeding in front of them. As they carried Ethan to the infirmary, he kept whispering, not prayers, not pain, but purpose. Protect each other. Keep the light alive. Hours passed. The storm outside turned into rain, tapping softly against the metal roof, as if the sky itself wept for him. Rico sat beside his bed, refusing to leave. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, his voice faint but filled with strength. Do you know why I stayed, Rico? Rico shook his head, tears falling. Ethan smiled again, that same calm, powerful smile. Because there's no freedom in walking away from broken things. True freedom is when you stay and fix them. And then, almost like a whisper to eternity, he added, Promise me you'll finish the mission. Rico nodded, holding his hand tight. I will, Ethan. I swear I will. A true leader doesn't die when he stops breathing. He lives on in every soul he touched. Ethan closed his eyes, and, for a moment, it felt like the whole prison held its breath. The man who refused freedom had finally found it in another way. But fate had one more twist to play, because as Rico prepared to carry Ethan's mission forward, he discovered something in Ethan's cell. Something that revealed the real reason he never wanted to leave Stonewall. Hidden under his mattress, inside a book with torn pages, was a small notebook filled with names, dates, and letters from prisoners' families. Ethan had been secretly helping their loved ones outside, finding jobs, reconnecting broken homes, rebuilding lives. He wasn't just freeing prisoners inside. He was freeing their families outside. The notebook ended with one final line. If I leave, they lose hope. If I stay, they remember how to live. Rico closed the book, tears streaming down his face, his voice trembling but strong. Then I'll stay too, until they all remember. The storm had passed, but a new dawn was rising. You can kill a man, but you can never kill a purpose born out of love. Part 4. The rebirth of the mission. The morning after Ethan's death was unlike any other. The air inside Stonewall Prison felt heavier, quieter, almost sacred. For the first time in years, even the toughest inmates sat still, heads bowed, hearts trembling. Something inside those iron walls had changed forever. Ethan Cole was gone, but his spirit, his spirit burned brighter than ever. Rico Hale, once the angriest man in Stonewall, now stood in the same courtyard where Ethan once spoke to them. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he carried, a mission, a promise, and a legacy. He looked at the crowd. Dozens of faces scarred by life, hardened by pain, but softened by grief. He didn't die for nothing, Rico said, his voice cracking, yet rising with fire. He stayed to remind us that we are more than what this place made us. He believed in us when no one else did. The men around him nodded. Some cried silently. The guards watched from above, not knowing whether to stop him or let him speak. Rico raised Ethan's old notebook high. "This book," he shouted, "is not a record of prisoners. It's a record of souls waiting to be reborn." And that moment, that single moment, was the spark that changed everything. From that day on, Stonewall Prison was never the same. Rico formed a circle called Ethan's Light. They met every night in the courtyard where Ethan once meditated. They read his quotes, his lessons, his words that now felt immortal. When one heart changes, the world begins to shift. Men who once fought each other now shared food, stories, and laughter. The walls that used to echo with screams now carried the sound of hope. Guards started to notice the change, too. Some even joined the meetings quietly, pretending they were just doing rounds. And slowly, something miraculous happened. The prison itself started healing. Violence dropped. Inmates began writing letters to their families, mending old wounds. Some started teaching others to read. Some learned trades. Some even started drawing murals on the gray walls. One of Ethan's face, his calm eyes and half-smile, painted beneath the words. Purpose never dies. The media outside caught wind of it. Reporters came, asking questions. "How did this happen?" they demanded. "How did a place built for punishment become a place of rebirth?" Rico looked straight into the camera and said, "Because one man refused freedom, so the rest of us could find it." That line went viral. The world called it the Stonewall Miracle. Soon, counselors, teachers, and volunteers started visiting. They wanted to study what Ethan had built. The government turned part of the prison into a rehabilitation program, calling it the Cole Initiative. But deep inside, Rico knew this was just the beginning, because Ethan's real dream wasn't to change a prison. It was to change people everywhere. So Rico began writing letters, hundreds of them, to schools, shelters, orphanages, and even other prisons. Each letter carried Ethan's words, his lessons, his purpose. And slowly, the world began to listen. When your pain becomes your message, your scars become someone else's healing. Years passed. Rico finally completed his sentence. The day his release came, he stood at the same gate Ethan once refused to walk through. The guard looked at him and said softly, "You're free to go." Rico smiled and replied, "No one ever really leaves Stonewall. We just carry it with us in our hearts." And as he stepped out into the sunlight, a wave of emotions hit him. Freedom, sorrow, pride, love. He looked back at the towering walls, whispering, "We did it. Ethan, we really did it." But little did Rico know, the mission was about to grow beyond anything Ethan had ever dreamed of. Because what started as a whisper inside a prison was now about to become a movement across the world. You can bury a man, but not a message whose time has come. Part 5. The Legacy That Changed the World. Years passed since the day Rico walked out of Stonewall Prison. The world outside had changed, but not as much as the man it once locked away. The sun felt warmer, the sky looked wider, and every breath of air carried the scent of something Ethan had planted deep inside him. Hope. Rico didn't waste a second. He built something beautiful out of the ashes of his past. With the help of former inmates and volunteers, he opened a small center in the city. One room, cracked walls, and an old signboard that read, The Reclaim Foundation, where second chances begin. At first, only a few people came, ex-prisoners, addicts, broken souls. But word spread like wildfire. Within months, the place was full of people searching for light, for forgiveness, for meaning. And everywhere Rico went, he carried Ethan's notebook. It had become the new scripture of the lost, a guide to rebuilding from within. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to rise after every fall. Soon, other prisons started writing to Rico. They wanted to start their own Ethan's Light circles. Some even asked for copies of the notebook. The government took notice. Documentaries were made. Reporters called it the revolution of redemption. But for Rico, it was never about fame. It was about finishing Ethan's mission. He said in every speech, every interview, Ethan taught me something the world forgets, that a man's greatest purpose begins where his pain once lived. Years later, Rico stood on a stage in front of thousands. Former inmates, teachers, leaders, even guards, all sitting together, united by one man's vision. Behind him hung a giant banner, the Cole Initiative, turning prisons into schools of purpose. Rico took a deep breath. His voice carried through the hall like thunder and calmness at once. Ethan Cole was never just a prisoner, he began. He was a mirror, showing us that even inside the darkest walls, a human heart can still shine like a star. The audience rose to their feet. Some cried, some clapped, and some simply closed their eyes, feeling the power of a man they'd never met but somehow knew. Then Rico lifted the same notebook Ethan once held in his trembling hands. These are his last words, he said, voice breaking. He wrote, "If love can enter a prison, then love can rebuild the world." And the crowd erupted in applause, tears, and joy. From that day, the Reclaimed Foundation grew into a global movement. Schools began teaching Ethan's philosophy. Rehabilitation programs were renamed after him. The phrase "refused freedom" became a symbol, a reminder that sometimes true freedom is the courage to stay and heal what others run from. Years later, as Rico grew old, he often visited Stonewall, now renamed Cole Reformation Center. The same gray walls that once held screams now echoed with laughter and music. Where once there were cells, now there were classrooms. Where there was darkness, now there was life. He walked into Ethan's old cell, untouched, preserved just as it was. On the wall hung Ethan's portrait with the words beneath it, "Purpose never dies." Rico placed his hand on the cold brick and whispered, "You did it, brother. You didn't just change us, you changed the world." He smiled, eyes glistening, as sunlight streamed through the barred window. It no longer looked like a cage. It looked like a frame holding the light of eternity. The world remembers those who live with fire in their soul, not fear in their heart. And as Rico walked away for the last time, the wind carried his words down the corridors. Freedom was never outside. It was always within. And that, my friends, is the story of the prisoner who refused freedom, because he had a bigger mission inside. A story not about walls or chains, but about a man who proved that sometimes the greatest revolution begins in the smallest cell. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.